Welcome to another edition of Drafts with Jordan and Josh. I am one of your two co-hosts, Josh Liskowitz, joined as always by the venerable Mr. Jordan Plocker. Jordan, how are you doing today?
I am so excited today, Josh. It's the cornerback episode. You shall not pass.
Yes, significantly more excited about this week's episode than last week's, for full disclosure. I love watching defensive backs. Not a particularly exciting class of corners, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But it's still cornerbacks are still a lot more fun to evaluate than running backs. We got some NFL football going on this week too, man. How exciting is that?
You know, it's always exciting to get back into the swing of things. It's like an old friend, Josh. But I guess just as Ben Stockwell tells me, just not your old friend didn't get fatter. It's just you're really excited to see this friend, and they didn't get fatter. They're just still cool. So yeah, excited our old friend football is back.
Jordan doesn't like fat people. For all of you that don't know, it's now out in the open. If you're fat, he does not like you.
I'm so judgy.
You are so hateful. But getting into that preseason NFL, one of the fun things that's come the last couple of years that's really started to develop from the preseason is the fact that you can still do daily fantasy. And with that, I think that leads in perfectly to DraftKings and FanDuel. Remember, we still have our deals with them. Make that $10 initial deposit. You're going to get a free subscription to PFF Edge by doing that. So if you're not signed up for either one of those, that's your chance to get really hooked up with all our great stuff that we're doing at Pro Football Focus. Get your subscription to Edge for that deposit.
Need to get that subscription to Edge because that's how you get the draft guide.
Oh, no question.
That's how you follow along. That's how you follow along with us.
Yes. When Jordan tells you turn to page 29, you know exactly what he's talking about because you're following along and you're turning it to page 29.
Yes, thank you. Be a good student.
Yeah, we also, for the second week, we're also partnering up with what's quickly becoming an obsession of mine, I have to admit, fandraft.com. For those of you that want to do the handy-dandy app, just look at draft. That's all you have to do is search for. It's awesome, Jordan. I love doing this. I've been doing it all week.
We love the draft.
Yeah, I love the draft, and that's what this is based on. Basically, it's a year-long fantasy league, just like you set up with all your friends. But all you do is you do the draft. It's a best ball league, so it's whatever your roster is, that's your roster for the entire season. You don't need to worry about free agency, waiver wire, trades, injuries, none of that nonsense. What you draft, that is your roster for the entire season. And it works kind of like the DFS leagues in terms of, you're playing with real money. You have you can play for $3. You can purchase your seat in a league. You could do a quick draft. So if you only have a few minutes, you can do one of those, and they're normally done in about 10 minutes. You'll have a draft, or you could do a long draft. I've been doing one that's it's taken me the whole week because you get like 8 hours to make your pick.
Sweet.
So if you want to do one, but just don't have the time to sit there and devote a large chunk of time to one specific draft, you can extend it out over like a full week, and it's kind of fun because every few hours I get this update on my phone. Hey, it's your turn to draft. You have 8 hours to do so. So it's a lot of fun. Again, just do your draft, best ball league, draft the best team, and you could win. Also, if you're signing up now, if you go to playdraft.com/PFF, you sign up there, and we will get you a free $3 entry. So how's that?
Woohoo!
You get to play with real money and win real money, too. So fun stuff, Jordan.
I like real money, and I like the draft, Josh. That does sound fun. All right, buddy. We are past the running backs. We made it.
Yes, we did.
We hurdled over.
Did it, fam.
We hurdled over. We hurdled over that position. We are now, on to the cornerbacks, like we said, and we're both excited, because we said this is a much more, entertaining. Selfishly, it's a much more entertaining position for us to evaluate than the running backs. But Josh, you hit on it earlier, and I just want to sort of reiterate this for our amazing listeners so they know. Last year was an incredible cornerback class where you could get a starter in the third round. We are not saying this is the same caliber of class at all. Now, don't get us wrong; there's still talented players. We're not saying it's a weak class, but do not expect the same caliber of draft class we had last year for the corners. Wouldn't you say, Josh?
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things where you hate when players coming out are compared to Hall of Famers that we know. Like every top safety is compared to Ed Reed. Well, that's not fair because Ed Reed is one of the all-time greats. That's the exception to the rule. And that same should hold true to last year's draft class for corners and safeties for that matter. It's just such an elite class, such incredible depth that you can't expect every class to be like that. And certainly the class immediately following that, of course, they're not going to have the same level, the same volume that we had last year. But that being said, there's still a bunch of intriguing guys. And as always, there's going to be guys that pop up throughout the year that we're not going to talk about now. They're going to get us excited later. So let's get into this, Jordan. Who do you want to start with?
Well, Josh, first of all, everybody needs to turn to page 372 in their draft guides. And I'm not joking, literally page 372. Yes. This thing is massive. Right now. This thing is massive, you guys. I mean, if you haven't already got yours, you need to get in the group, you need to get in the club with the rest of us cool kids here, because 372 pages, and that's not even the end, that's just where the cornerbacks start. This thing is insane. Like, seriously, I'm really, really excited about this thing, Josh, because like nothing like this ever existed when I was, coming up, and I was so passionate about the draft my whole life. And then now this week, we never had this much information going into a season. It's incredible with 3 years worth of grades.
Yeah. And being a draft guy and doing this might be my 11th year of doing draft analysis, but one of the things that always kind of annoyed me for the previous 7-8 years is I would start the season and it would be exciting because it'd be fresh and brand new. But I literally had no idea on any of the guys anywhere because I was so absorbed with last year's class all the way up until the end. And because of what we've been able to compile this offseason, I feel like I know everybody. And it's that much more exciting for me to have a really good, strong idea of what we're looking at this year.
No, I totally agree. If I wasn't already an employee, I would definitely be a subscriber because this thing is incredible. And like you said, it's basically just setting up it's setting up all our subscribers to just have a great year as far as knowing who the top players are, having stats to back it up. And again, the stats are just incredible when you think about it. I mean, we've been grading every player in college football we have data on for the last 3 years. I mean, that's just mind blowing to me. So again, there's so much information in there, you guys, to help you make better decisions about how you feel about these players or how they may help your team or whatever reason you want to, just really love the draft. But again, tons of information. So we're turning to page 372, Josh, and we're going to start off, with Minka Fitzpatrick from Alabama. And we've frequently mentioned on here, during the course of the show, over these episodes about how well coached the Nick Saban DBs are at Alabama. And, it's as long as you're getting a fairly healthy player, I think you're getting a fairly, I even don't want to say NFL ready, but you're getting a DB who's really well coached, really close to being ready. We'll say that. And that's sort of the deal with Minka Fitzpatrick. He's got the decent size. He's right around 6 foot, I think, and then 200 pounds. Yeah. He did allow 2 touchdowns last year, but he had 6 interceptions and 8 passes defensed. And so that's 14 plays on the ball, Josh. And we know from listening to all these GMs, they really value corners like that, right? That can make plays on the ball.
Yeah, and that's right around near the top of the country last year. So I don't know if he'll be able to improve it. Knowing he's at Alabama, he might, because it's not like there's a stiff on the other side, so right, he's still going to get his targets this year. Yeah, I think it's also worth pointing out the progression he made from 2015 to 2016, at least in terms of statistically. In 2015, he had 2 picks, 6 passes defended. Quarterbacks had a passer rating of 79.4 when throwing into his coverage. He basically halved that this past season. You already went over the interceptions and passes defensed, but he gave up 2 less touchdowns. He only gave up 2 last year, and his passer rating against was just 37.8. So that's really outstanding. In fact, that passer rating, that was second best in the country among corners with at least 60 targets into their coverage last year.
That's impressive.
And even better than that, if you look at him on deep balls, quarterbacks had a pass rating of just 10.1 on throwing 20-plus yard passes downfield on him. So basically, if you were trying to throw into his coverage downfield, you were making a terrible decision.
Yeah, seriously. So he is our CB1 right now. Doesn't stand out to being just the most incredible explosive athlete. Just sort of a smooth guy who can looks like he could play inside or out. But basically, he's where the corner conversation starts for this draft class. Should he decide to come out? All right, we're going to move on to the next corner, Josh, and we kind of like this guy with the way he played, and that was Louisville's Jaire Alexander. He allowed 6 touchdowns last year in coverage, but he was able to come up with 5 interceptions and 9 passes defensed. Again, tons of plays on the ball. There's a lot to like on this guy, especially as far as the intermediate area. He had the number 3 grade in the nation when targeted on intermediate passes between that 10 to 19 yard range. Where a lot of the work gets done in the NFL. So a lot to like about Alexander's game. What stood out to you, Josh?
Yeah, I thought if you're going to compare to Fitzpatrick, certainly Jaire's a superior athlete. Lot twitchier. He's got a lot more break and close explosiveness. Can change directions better. Some of the things that stood out to me as questions, though, really, I thought his size stood out. He's listed at 5'11". I think he's probably a little bit shorter than that, around 190 pounds. So certainly he's not quite the size you really want. Can't do much about the height. You'd like to see him bulk up a little bit. But I think it shows in his game, too, because there are times where he would get out muscled by bigger wide receivers when he's covering them in man, and I didn't think he did a very good job of tackling. He's missed 8 of his 60 attempts in his first 2 seasons, so that's not a very impressive total. And so that lends itself to the idea that he really needs to add another 10 or so pounds of muscle and improve himself in those areas. So if he can do that, I think he has a chance to be a pretty high pick, regardless of him being under 5'11", because he's a pretty solid player to watch, and his coverage skills are excellent. There's no question about that in my mind.
Yeah, the other thing about him is he can play in the slot. I mean, we saw that on film, and we watched him on film, and my notes bear that out. I think so does the data. He looks like a guy who could play in the slot. So, you mentioned his height and his athleticism. So maybe he might be a guy that some teams might view more as a slot corner than an outside guy. But again, one of the premier guys to watch, and we should see him on the TV a lot this fall, especially because of people wanting to watch his quarterback play. This is what are they like? They're both. Neither one of those guys are really that huge, but we do get some bigger guys as we move a little bit further down, Josh. And I wanted to get to a small school guy that we really liked on tape as far as standing out, and that was North Dakota's Deon Harris. And I think he's right around 6'2" or something like that, so much bigger than these other 2 guys. Still a little, thin, for I guess for what we'd like to see. But really just sort of, again, plays at North Dakota, but I mean, makes plays on the ball, that pro size, there's, what did stood out to you about Harris that you think can translate to the NFL?
Yeah, certainly that size is excellent. You have to love that. And the level of athleticism he showed too. I thought he was pretty impressive in terms of his ability to flip his hips and change directions, considering how long and high cut he is. So when you see that kind of athletic ability with that size, boy, that just screams modern day cornerback, modern day cover 3 type guy. And that's the majority of the league right there. So that tells you right there, there's going to be a lot of intrigue with him. Definitely needs to bulk up. He's a little thin. And to be honest, being at North Dakota, that's not a terrible, huge surprise, but I would imagine as soon as he gets into an NFL weight program, he's going to be able to pack on 10 to 15 pounds onto that frame without too much of a problem, and probably without sacrificing too much of his movement skills. Some of the things he has to work on, he has a tendency of getting too physical down the field. Obviously, that can lend itself to penalties or just sloppiness in coverage, so he needs to work on that. Also susceptible to double moves, we saw. And it's just one of those things where I think he's so aggressive in all facets of his game. Sometimes he just needs to kind of let the play out and stop trying to make the home run play every single time. But obviously the competition level is a concern as well. So he doesn't have a ton of experience there. Good thing is he's a senior. I got to imagine at this point he's certainly on Uncle Phil's radar for the Senior Bowl. And I talked quite a bit on the podcast the other day with Steve and Mike about the benefits of, these kids, and maybe it was you too, talking about the benefit of the Senior Bowl and how that works out for small school kids. And I certainly hope Deon Harris is one of those guys that gets that opportunity.
Yeah, and I think he will. I mean, when you look at him on paper, and he's again like around 6'2", those long arms, and then you watch him on film and you see that he's smooth, and you don't really see any sort of too many issues with his movement, and you realize, like you said, Josh, I think he could be really excel in that cover 3 type scheme, which a lot of teams are playing now. So I think the NFL's really going to like him, and I think that Senior Bowl where he gets to, instead of going up against top FCS guys, he's going to be going up against the top just players around the country. So that's going to be awesome for him. And as we know from listening to these NFL general managers, they really value those practice reps and seeing those guys try to, face that uptick in competition. So I said, that's a great point, Josh. He'll definitely be a guy that we should probably see at the Senior Bowl and be one of the more intriguing players to watch. Mm-hmm. All right, I want to flip it up on you, Josh. I want to change body types altogether. And we'll go big school. So I'm going to go Florida, Josh. I want to go Duke Dawson, the corner from Florida, who, again, completely different build than Deon Harris, right? I mean, like Dawson almost looked like a little safety, a little strong safety or something, because he's like 5'10" and like 210 pounds. He's really thick and sort of a twitchy athlete. I think you're the first one to point him out to me. What did you like about Dawson?
Yeah, he played mostly in the slot corner last year, was strong against the run, graded really well there. He has the movement skills you want for a cornerback, so he's not a guy that, even though his body type kind of looks like safety, athletically he can certainly hang as far as being a corner. I liked a lot about him. I thought he was a pretty solid athlete in terms of that, but we don't know that much about him. Florida's had so many corners recently, and obviously they had 2 pretty high draft picks last year. I think this is the year where we kind of learn more about him. As stocky as he is, that height is a concern, and I think there were times on film where he might have struggled a little bit with some of the bigger guys. And the way the NFL works now, too, is, we always want to throw the small guys in the slot. And certainly it helps a little bit when he's got his build. But at the same time, a lot of those slot receivers are the 6'6", 250-pound tight ends now. So that's a little concern. So I hope we get to see a lot more of him outside this year and see more of what of his skill set is there.
You totally ruined my thought, because I was going to say, man, with that build, he should go in the slot. And then you just threw me under a bus.
I did.
Yeah, I mean, I agree.
It's a preemptive throwing under the bus, for the record.
I think he's, I think he's got, again, with that build and his physicality and his playing style, I think that he can play slot, at the next level. But I agree with your assessment, Josh. We need to see him outside a bit more this year, performing well. He had some great numbers last year. He forced an incompletion on 31% of his targets, which is the best among all draft-eligible cornerbacks. He did allow 2 touchdowns in coverage last year, Josh, but he had 1 interception and 7 passes defense, so 8 plays on the ball. Again, a lot to like there. But yeah, you mentioned it. I mean, how's he going to go up against like some of these 6'5" big slots that people are running out there now? So
right off the bat, they get Michigan week 1. Now Michigan has a host of true freshmen coming in that are big time recruits at the wide receiver position. So I'm intrigued to see what a player like him, who again we want to see what he does outside, we want to see what he does against bigger guys. Maybe that's a good start for him, starting against a big school, against talent, but raw talent that is just getting introduced to the college game. Maybe that helps him out. Maybe that gets him started out on the right foot. We'll see how he performs against Michigan.
All right, let's move on to another player. We're going to stay in Florida there, Josh. We're going to go to Florida State's Tavares Mcfadden. Again, we're going back on the body types here. This is a guy who is legit 6'1", like 200 pounds. So he's got a lot of that size that the NFL is going to look for. There were some things that stood out to him, like sort of negatively on tape, I mean, sometimes we saw him, it sort of looked like he lost track of the ball, on some of those deep passes and things like that. I mean, I had that in my notes. As it just sort of looked, I was like, ooh, he looked like he lost that one. But he had, he did give up 7 touchdowns last year, Josh, but he had 8 interceptions and 7 passes defense. So 15 plays on the ball, plays in that, competitive ACC, a lot of good offensive talent out there. What do you like about McFadden?
Yeah, I think when you just watch him move, you get excited because, again, he's a big kid. If he's not 6'2", he's close to it. I mean, he's legit to that size, and he's about 200 pounds. And I think he can play with that level of physicality that you would expect out of a 200-pounder there. So in terms of height, weight, speed, I think you're getting exactly what you want at the position. But he's just so boom and bust at times. I want to see more consistency out of him. You already went over the numbers, and I think that really bears out. Gave up 7 touchdowns last year. That's a lot. But even though at times he looked lost, like he wasn't tracking the ball well, wasn't finding it, he still had 8 interceptions. So that's nothing to sneeze at. I mean, that's an outstanding total. So I want to see where his development goes this year. I kind of think that he's going to figure it out, and I think he's going to be one of the top guys in this class, because when I look at him physically, athletically, and just those flashes he shows, if he can put that all together, I think he very well could end up being the top corner in this draft. I know everyone wants to give that to Minka Fitzpatrick, and certainly the numbers bear that out last year, but I don't think Fitzpatrick has the same athletic upside as McFadden. So I'm excited to see that, and coincidentally, talking about week 1 games, those two are going to be on opposite sides of the field against each other this coming the week 1, right?
Nice. All right, let's get out of Florida, Josh. It's humid there. There are very large bugs and sometimes rather large animals on golf courses.
Spoken like a true desert person.
We're going to go all the way out to the farm and Stanford, and a player that you and I like, we've been talking about for a while now. We talked about a lot last year, and that's Quinton Meeks. Just to me, I mean, when I think of an NFL press corner that's playing in college right now, I think of this guy, and I know Steve Palazzolo says that he likes him a little bit better and off, and I think that this guy, I think Meeks has the size and the length and the physicality plus the foot quickness to be a really effective press corner in the NFL. What do you like about Meeks, Josh?
Yeah, again, you see that size, athleticism combo, and I think you see some of the intelligence too. You hate to be stereotypical because obviously he went to Stanford, so
that's our scouting
must be
shortcut.
smart.
Remember, smart.
Yes, exactly.
Stanford,
you go to
guys,
Stanford,
just write smart.
You go to Stanford, Duke, obviously Michigan. You're smart. That's just the way it is. But there's a lot to like on him in film, and I'll tell you this, without really having to see him. He had some injury issues last year, Jordan. And being the degenerate I am, being that I did the PFF college picks, I knew when he was out of the lineup, I could count on whoever Stanford's opponent was to cover. And in that case, they were clobbering Stanford at that point when he was out, because really his absence completely messed up that defense last year. So I think that's pretty telling. I think that's something to watch for this year. Obviously, you want him to stay healthy this year, but I think that tells you a little bit about his skill set and what he means to that team, and that means he's a pretty important player to them.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up a great point there, Josh. He was one of the few players that I watched last year in college football who, on the defensive side of the ball, when there was just a noticeable drop-off in the entire unit's quality of play when they were gone. Yeah, and he was definitely one of them. Because he can, when he's effective in that coverage, he can shut down, a top guy on one side of the field.
Well, it's not just that. It's think about all the other things you can do. If he's taken out the top guy on your offense, you can be more aggressive with your pass rush, meaning you're affecting the quarterback that much more. Not only is he not getting his top guy, but he's seeing pressure quicker and more often from a variety of places. And you can be a little tighter on the other side, too, in terms of giving help elsewhere where it's needed as well. So when you have one guy that's locking down part of it, that's a huge part of the game. We talk about draft strategy quite a bit, and that's obviously something we'll talk about later with our North teams that we're looking at this week. But one of the main strategies we're seeing year in and year out with the NFL draft and the NFL and football in general is you either beef up the pass rush or you beef up the cornerbacks, because you're basically accomplishing the same thing either way. If you take away that weapon because the pass rush gets there too quick, that's perfect. If on the other side, if you're taking away the receiving weapon that your quarterback's relying on, well, you're creating problems for the offense that way as well.
Yeah, and and Meeks is definitely, like I said, like a problem creator in that capacity. He did give up 4 touchdowns in coverage. He had 2 interceptions and 3 passes defensed. And the passer rating throwing against him is 81.5. But again, what he's doing is so much more than that. And Josh, you pointed out just, his football intelligence. And one of the things that, you and I constantly harp on with a lot of times with these prospects is, family history and things like that. And this guy's dad is Ron Meeks. So he's got, legit, athleticism, and that sort of DNA, but he's also got the football intelligence DNA, right? Being like a coach's kid like that. I mean, I have to think this guy's got to be one of the better prospects from the shoulders up on the football field, don't you think?
Right. Plus, again, we talked about with a couple of last year's big prospects, he's going to understand how to be a pro. And that counts for something.
Yeah, really looking forward to watching Meeks again, and hopefully he stays healthy this year and should have a big year. He would be an early entry if he decided to come out, but I think that he might. Oh, who knows with those Stanford kids? A lot of times, sometimes they decide to stay. Although I say that, and Thomas and McCaffrey came out early, so you never know, Josh. Each situation is different, Josh. Speaking of situations, Josh, do you know that I don't like to leave the house, right?
The roamer, wanderer, nomad, vagabond, you are not.
I don't like to leave the house at all. So I'm pretty excited about this new product we found out about called Tavor. It's a beer delivery service, which I didn't know that could exist before, Josh. So I'm really excited about that. So it's
a game changer.
I know, right? I don't have to go outside, Josh. Well, I guess I have to go outside to get the beer, but I don't have to leave.
Well,
and go
especially
to a
you.
store.
You're in the desert. Who wants to go outside when it's 110 degrees outside?
So
right?
hot. Yeah, right. Because then you melt into a puddle, and then you step into the puddle that's actually yourself melted. It's really gross. So, so you don't have to worry about that with Tavor. You choose daily. You can download the mobile app, and then you get access to their exclusive lineup of beers. You'll get notifications of new beer that comes in, and then it's a lot of times, if you're a fan of beers and you live in the Ohio, Kentucky area. I live in Arizona. If you fall in love with one of my beers and you can't find it out there, well, you're out of luck. Well, with Tavor, you can get they have beers that you can't find in your area. So that's cool. They work with over 400 independent breweries around the world. So you're talking about all this great beer coming right to you. It's not a beer of the month club though, Josh. You just pick the beer you want. And after you sign up, there's no monthly commitments or subscription fees or anything like that. It's just beer to your door, Josh. Beer to your door. Yes.
Yep.
Yep. Super excited about this, Josh, because I don't have to go to the store anymore.
There you go.
All right, Josh, it is time to go inside the war rooms, where we're going to go inside 2 different NFL teams' war rooms. We always start off with our NFC team. We are still in the North, Josh. We are going to start off with the Chicago Bears, who kind of really sort of tipped this whole draft on its ear with, a move they made, talking to, not talking to, it's not like I was talking to all these GMs, but listening to these GMs, a lot of them really point to that quarterback that went early as, the thing that set everything else in motion going in behind it. So very, very influential pick there with Ryan Pace. What is his 3rd year as GM there, Josh? It was kind of strange, because, I know you heard these rumors because they were out there that there was rumors that John Fox didn't even know they were trading for Mitch Trubisky until the day of.
Yep.
I mean, that's a little weird, doesn't it?
That's extremely weird, and that should be concerning if there's any truth behind that. Quite frankly, those 2 positions above anybody else in any organization need to be in lockstep. That's why franchises like New England succeed, because the general manager is the coach and he has a clear and working vision of what that team is. And probably the better example is Seattle. Schneider and Pete Carroll, they are completely in lockstep as to what they are trying to accomplish. and the kind of guys they're trying to get and what their draft strategy is going to be. And I just think that's paramount to the success of the team. So if there's any truth behind that, that should be very concerning to Bears fans.
Yeah, they appear to still highly value the input of their scouts, and they value the input of their coaches too. I know John Fox does go hit up pro days and things of that nature, but yeah, it just seems weird that he wouldn't have been in on that. But yeah, again, we don't know if that's true, but if it is, it's odd. That's all. That's all I can really say about that.
Yeah.
But the strategy that goes behind it, like whether or not you like Mitch Trubisky more than the other quarterbacks is aside. Josh, I know that you and I both like Patrick Mahomes more than any other quarterback, but that was just our own personal bias. PFF had Mitch Trubisky ranked as the top quarterback. You can't fault the Bears for going with the top quarterback there, but they, even though they just signed Mike Glennon in free agency, it's almost like this is a philosophical thing, Josh. Like it really didn't. I mean, I'm sure they like Mitch Trubisky, the player, but it almost just seemed like they were going to go quarterback there just because of philosophy.
Yeah, and Pace made the comment, and he said, and I'll quote your quote here, the only chance you get to add quarterbacks like this is when you're picking this high in the draft and taking advantage of it. So my question is, or at least my feeling on that in terms of kind of interpreting what he's saying there is there's no guarantee they're going to get that other opportunity. And certainly when you start getting multiple opportunities for that, that's when your head coach and GM are in trouble.
Yeah, because you don't want to be drafting in the top 5.
No, because that means jobs are on the line because you're just not performing on the field. Right. So ultimately, what Pace is saying here, in my opinion, is that this will hopefully be our one and only shot to get that franchise guy. So we need to take advantage of it as long as we find a guy that is available there. And to them, obviously, Trubisky was available and worthwhile for that move, and that's what they did. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. If Trubisky ends up being the man, then no one's ever going to care about what compensation they gave up or anything. It's completely irrelevant. If the quarterback is the right quarterback, then they're fine.
Right. No, yeah, and I agree. And hearing Pace, he constantly was saying the quarterback situation. The quarterback position is the most important position in sports. Yeah. So it's like, he felt he had to take somebody there to try to make sure that position is secure. So again, when you think of it from that philosophy, to me, it makes sense. From a long-term roster stability, long-term winning, long-term business decision standpoint. Even if he does sit for a couple of years, you still sort of take care of that position long-term. But I would think he'd eventually beat out Glennon pretty quickly. But yeah, again, the thing that was, and you mentioned the compensation, but the fact that they moved from, where were they at, 3 to 2?
3 to 2, yeah.
To try to jump somebody. I mean, there were rumors that maybe the Browns liked him. I don't know who else they were trying to jump.
Well, I think San Francisco is one of those teams. I mean, I had personally heard some rumors from a couple different sources that Shanahan was a big fan of Trubisky. So, I mean, obviously, if you're trading with that team and it's for a quarterback, the assumption is at that point they at least don't like him enough to, be married to him.
Right.
But at the same time, they were worried about that. You mentioned Cleveland. Obviously, they didn't take him number 1, but they still had the extra currency from, at that point, pick number 12. So they, certainly had the ammo, and we'll get into Cleveland later.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But they certainly had the ammo to get back up as high as number 2. So in their eyes, they had to make sure they got their guy when it's a quarterback, and you really do that without, sparing expense. So
yeah. So yeah, I agree. Can't fault them for it. And again, just from hearing them talk about it and just looking at it in hindsight, the whole thing really makes sense to me. Mm-hmm. And I hope it really, hope it works out for them, especially because they, risked so much to get him. As a player, they really liked his athleticism and ability to extend plays. But one of the things that we always harp on, that he does keep his eyes downfield. So they like that. Because you want your quarterback still looking downfield, trying to find, your talented wide receivers. They thought he was very good on third down, and then they liked, leadership, work ethic, and stuff like that. And then one of the stats I thought that was interesting that they pointed out to Josh was Ryan Pace said that he had a very good completion percentage with the pressure in his face. And so I looked in our draft guide, which is available in PFF Edge, and he had a 66.7 adjusted completion percentage under pressure, which ranked number 5. So yeah, it was. I think Ryan Pace is reading our draft guide. Josh, what do you think?
Oh, I'm sure he is. There's no question. He has to be, right?
Right. There's so much good info.
I will say this: he's ranked number 5 in the draft class in this statistic, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, 66.7% is a standalone. I think that's excellent. So that proves the point. But we're also talking about he has to be the number 1 quarterback from this class. And if that's like the signature stat for you, and I'm not saying it is, it's just something he pointed out, being number 5 isn't that great. So, well, again, the standalone nature of the stat in terms of 66.7% is very good. In terms of ranking within a class, I don't think that's anything special.
You're so tough.
I am tough, but I think it's fair.
Tough love from Josh Liskowitz. They said Ryan Pace said that Trubisky's accuracy jumps out right away on film. His ability to process and see the whole field jumps out right away on film. So, which
should always be number 1, number 2.
Yeah,
at least in terms of evaluating film. Obviously, the leadership, work ethic stuff that oftentimes we're not privy to, and we certainly don't have a way to quantify it as PFF likes to do everything else as much as possible. But accuracy and ability to see the field, you have to be able to do that as an NFL quarterback, or you're not going to succeed. I don't care how big your arm is. If you can't do those 2 things, you're not going to be a starter.
And the see the field thing too is, I mean, it's 2 separate things, but I think that's why there's only, 2 dozen capable starting quarterbacks anymore, because
I think that's even generous. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about, it's something that you said it's hard to even quantify, but you're talking about people who can how quickly can they process information while under duress? And that's, again, that varies so much from person to person. You could meet the most confident person in the world normally, and they may turn into just a complete, blob under that sort of, pressure. And you can meet someone who you probably wouldn't think would respond well, and they could end up being able to really quickly process information under that stress and deliver, on time and accurate. So it's, one of those things that's really strange and it's really difficult to really see without sort of, I guess, how, watching film, Josh, is how I kind of try to see if guys can do it. But I mean, I guess other than talking to like coaches or things like that. But yeah, it's so important. But again, so difficult to necessarily see if it's going to translate or not.
Right.
But yeah, and then seeing the field again, the same thing, Josh. I mean, it's like, that's, it's better. It's more of a skill than just, I can throw hard or I can throw, fast or a long distance. It's, can your eyes fully survey, this huge area? So again, really things that need to show up on film, and those things showed up on film for Trubisky. Now, their next pick, Josh, was someone who we really didn't get a chance to see much of last year because he played at Ashland, and that was tight end Adam Shaheen. What do you think they liked in Adam Shaheen?
Yeah, to me, the key was some of his versatility. In terms of, Ryan Pace talked about, he can run good routes, he could separate, natural hands, good body control, catch radius. Also said it's impressive to see him move and get in and out of his routes that's sudden for a guy that's that big. So it's kind of a combination of the size and physicality you want for a tight end, but the athleticism of the modern day tight end that can consistently stretch those seams, create mismatches, not just against safeties because of the size, but against linebackers because of the speed as well.
Yeah, and this is one of those things that I think it goes back to what we mentioned earlier, that they really trust their scouting department. Because if you're an exec and someone goes, hey, I got this tight end at Ashland, you got to see. You're going to be, oh, come on, Josh, really? A tight end at Ashland? But yeah, so Jeff Shiver, the area scout down there, was really, I guess, on Shaheen early, which I guess, if you're examining that level of competition, it wouldn't be that hard to spot him. he looks pretty monstrous compared to everybody else, and they said he dominated his level of competition.
Yeah.
But again, I think they're going to be able to use him in a lot of different ways, don't you, Josh?
Yeah, I think there's no question about that. And certainly you want to be able to get your rookie quarterback a nice target like that. Certainly when the Colts drafted Andrew Luck, they tried to do the same with Dwayne Allen and Kobe Fleener as well. So, and obviously I didn't fully work out there, but still I think the rationality behind that is sound.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think it's also worth pointing out too that, and we'll get into their drafting of a number of small school guys this year and the year prior, but it's not like Shaheen was an unknown. Yes, he went to a smaller school, but he was very well regarded around the NFL. That was no secret that he was going to go day 2 at some point. So it's not like they just plucked this guy out of thin air. As often seems to be the case sometimes with some of these small school kids, it can often sometimes seem like teams just trying to outsmart others by taking someone that no one else had heard of and hoping that they hit the diamond in the rough.
Yeah, well, their next pick, they went big school on us.
They did.
And they went with a Saban DB, so they went with Eddie Jackson, the safety from Alabama. A guy who, I believe, he missed. How much of the season did he miss? He missed like a portion of the season with an injury, right?
Yeah, he missed a good portion of it too. Plus, he was converting from playing corner to safety, so it was kind of a weird year for him in terms of trying to figure out his evaluation. But the reality is they need help at both. They need corners and safeties. And you have, again, a Saban defensive back that's a guy that, in theory, should be able to come in and produce right away, assuming he's healthy. They liked his vocal leadership. Obviously, a young defense, a young team in general like that, they need leadership types. Mm-hmm. And guys that are used to winning. I don't think we should overlook that as well. Obviously, he went to Alabama. That's all they do, except for the last game, is win games. So that's what he knows, and bringing that kind of mentality to a franchise that has really struggled to win games the last 4 or 5 years, I think that's very valuable. That's an
awesome point. I didn't think about that. It's weird seeing the different strategies that these teams employ. Some of the teams that we've already covered, like the Dallas Cowboys or something like that, are really only taking guys from these big schools like in Alabama or Michigan, things like that. But the Bears, man, Josh, they went the exact opposite route this time around. In their next pick, they took Tariq Cohen from North Carolina A&T. Josh, what's going on? We've already had Ashland, and now we're at North Carolina A&T. What's happening, Josh?
Yeah, it's another guy that obviously he wasn't as highly regarded as Shaheen, but certainly was on our radar. I know you and I looked at him probably, a week or two before the draft. Exciting player to watch on film. I mean, he's a tiny little back, so you worry about his full usage. While he should be excellent as a receiver out of the backfield, I think that's something he's going to be featured in early on. He's too small to be able to handle pass blocking. Not something I think he did well at his level, and certainly bumping up to the NFL level is not going to help him. But he's just, you called him, long since called him the human joystick. Just a guy that's so hard to get your hands around because he's so quick and elusive in space. And so when initially you're probably going to be playing him on third down as a receiver out of the backfield, I think you're going to create those opportunities where you're isolating him one-on-one in space against linebackers, and he's going to make life hell for them.
That's a good point. So he can play on third down, but you're right. Maybe you don't want him necessarily staying in the pocket in pass pro, but rather get him out there and on those backers.
Yep. I almost wonder if they might try and work him in the slot a little bit as well because of that. Because it's no secret. I mean, he's
right
outside of him maybe chipping on the edges. He shouldn't ever be asked to make one-on-one blocks. I just don't think he's ever going to be able to do that.
Yeah, well, it would just be a bad use of his skill set when he could be out there, making a mismatch in the pass game. I think you're right. I think he's a guy that, again, you could go out there in 11 personnel on third down, line him up in the backfield, and then motion him out to the slot and go empty. And then that way he's not worrying about pass protection. He's just worrying about getting open. But again, I think we'll see him be used in pass situations like that. I think he's going to catch a decent amount of passes this year, and then just be yards after the catch monster. really explosive. We said just that, can change direction really quickly, can make people miss. They're one of their area quotes. The area scout Sam Somerville said, "This is the most exciting, most electric HBCU football player that I've seen in a long time." So again, small school guy, but a guy that they think can really make plays in the NFL level. And Josh, we constantly talking about the mismatch guys, and sometimes you got to get guys who are different sizes and things like that. And it almost seems like what the Bears did intentionally with their massive tight end and their small running back.
Yep. Also, another point that I'd like to make as well, and you kind of, obviously you've hinted at it twice, and you briefly talked about it at the beginning of the segment, but if you're a scout, wouldn't you love to be with the Bears? I mean, we just talked about 2 different area scouts that were allowed to rep their small school guy in front of the media. So they trust you enough to, A, take your small school guy with a significant pick, and B, they trust your judgment and your ability to speak on them, to speak publicly in front of the media on them. You got to love that as a scout, that you're valued that much by your team. I mean, we've talked about that throughout, how that runs differently with every club, but I think that's good on the Bears, and I think that leads to the long-term stability and happiness of that scouting staff.
Yeah, it sounds like it. That sounds like it would be a good team to work for as a scout.
Yeah.
The last player they took was a player that their coaching staff got a really close look at, and that was Jordan Morgan, the offensive lineman from Kutztown. They coached him at the Senior Bowl, Josh. That was, that's always a fun experience for the coaching staff when they get to do that.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And Pace said that Senior Bowl experience kind of cemented it for them. That was the kind of player he was. So they got a chance, obviously, to see him up close, to see his power, just his demeanor. They thought he was nasty and a consistent finisher. All those buzzwords that all offensive line coaches love. But they loved the way he dominated his level of competition, and then obviously bring him up, getting a chance to see him against the top guys at the Senior Bowl and how he translated there as well. That really did it for him. And it makes sense. I mean, we talked about that all the time, and there's a player that we're going to talk about, the next team we talk about in a few minutes here. Same deal in terms of handling that step up in competition. It's such a great opportunity for these smaller school kids. And every year there's 5, 6, 7 of them that really excel in that capacity.
No doubt. And I think they're going to be moving him more inside to possibly play guard. So, moving forward to their next draft, I really have to think that at some point a tackle's got to be in play. I'm not saying it's going to be, maybe next year or the year after, but at some point you got to start to protect, the Trubisky investment. Don't you think? Maybe just I think they're going to take a tackle high at some point.
They might be okay at left tackle. I'm definitely willing to give him another go. The Boise State kid, but certainly you can't be relying on Massey long term on the right side, and that's something else we've talked about, and certainly Steve Palazzolo has been the ringleader in this for years in terms of you don't have a left tackle and a right tackle now. You really have 2 left tackles because the league just throws rushers all over the place on you, and both your guys have to be equally competent in pass protection and obviously run blocking. And I just don't think at this point they're going to get that consistently from Bobby Massey.
All right, Josh, it is time to switch over to the balmy AFC North and the Cleveland Browns. Sashi Brown is their executive vice president of football operations / general manager. They have Paul DePodesta as their chief strategy officer. And then personnel side, Andrew Berry is their VP of player personnel, heavily involved in the whole scouting side of things. But Josh, I got to tell you, these guys, they're operating in a different world or arena than the way that a lot of these other teams operate. They don't want to go into a draft with just their allotted picks. They just seem like they're on a mission to really turn over that roster, and so they want to go into every draft with more than 7 picks, you know what I mean? Isn't that the sort of vibe that you're getting from them?
Yeah, there's no question about that. I mean, they had 3 first-round picks and 11 total this past season. Looking ahead to next year, they already have, 2 first-rounders, 3 second-rounders?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where they took Kaiser in the second round. We'll talk about him later. Should he pan out immediately, maybe they still consider taking a quarterback in the second round. Maybe they're even better in a position to do something the Patriots used to do for so long, where they would keep trading back, still have just a ton of picks, but they always seem to have that extra first or second rounder, either to get another top shelf guy the following season or trade back and continue to accrue currency. So I think it's a very unique strategy. And another point to be made, I think it's a really interesting juxtaposition with one of the blue bloods of their division, Pittsburgh Steelers, a team that is notorious for standing pat. Now, obviously, the Steelers are often picking in 20s, but they're notorious for standing pat, waiting for the draft board to come to them and not making the kind of trades that Cleveland's done. I mean, Jordan, they made 9 trades in the last 2 drafts.
Yeah, it's crazy. And again, if you think about just having extra draft picks as, extra money or, extra, pieces to maneuver around, it just gives you so much freedom to be like, oh, you know what, we like this guy, let's move up. Or, we can move back and get more picks. But it just gives you this sort of freedom to move around and do what you want to do. And, it's a lot of times it takes sacrifice to get there. You got to sacrifice some picks one year to start getting extra picks, but to get to the point where you have all these extra day 1 and day 2 picks is it's almost masterful, like how they even got there at this point. Like you said, they had 3 first round picks this past year and they have 2 next year with 3 seconds. It's ridiculous.
Now you got to make them count.
That
doesn't matter how many first round picks you have. You got to make them count. And that might be a little teaser or something we do a little bit later, but let's go on and start looking at these picks.
Yeah, the first pick, it was just a slam dunk. I mean, you had to do it, right? I mean, it was Myles Garrett. I mean, you're saying like off the field, the guy is just a top-notch person, and then on the field, he's just a freak, one of the best athletes, prospects in a while. So, yeah, that's just a no-brainer, and I think he's going to make an impact right away.
Yep, and I think one of the more interesting quotes on him, obviously we know what he is as a player on the field, and he's number 1 overall player. I don't think we need to go into too much of that with him. But Sashi Brown made a point to say that their psychological testing and background testing for him was off the charts. So, obviously that's something they value considerably, but it's interesting to also see that approach too. And it makes sense for number 1 overall pick. You better be damn well sure you're getting your guy who's going to be there for you every single time you need it, both on and off the field, and they feel they got that with Myles Garrett.
Yeah, again, just a great value, like you said, on and off the field. Great pick for them at number 1. It was the no-brainer pick. Mm-hmm. Now remember, they had that pick at 12, and there was rumors that they may try to trade back up and get a quarterback. But I think at that point Trubisky was gone, and Mahomes went 10, right? Because Kansas City traded up to 10. So I'm not saying they didn't. They weren't going to take one of those guys. I think there's a chance that they might have taken one of those guys if they fell to them, but the things didn't really work out, so they ended up trading back, and then they took a guy that pretty well, Jabril Peppers from Michigan, that they think they can play him at strong safety is how they view him, but they're really excited to pair him with defensive coordinator Greg Williams. They think he can play both free and strong safety. So again, they're really, really excited about how they are going to use him. What do you think that we're going to see from him, Josh?
Yeah, I was encouraged to see Hugh Jackson say that he's one of the premier special teams players in football, a tremendous punt and kick returner. First off, he's right. Obviously, he was ridiculous in that capacity, but that also hints that that's where their mindset is, at least initially, that's where he's going to be contributing. Because the reality is, while they try and carve out a role for him, figure out what he does, and Hugh also said it'll be really interesting just to see how Greg uses him. So I think that kind of hints that they're not sure what to do with him just yet. They just like the athlete and the alpha dog mentality that he brings, and certainly Cleveland needs that. But the fact that they're willing to put him on special teams like that, you don't always get that with first-round picks. And I think it's critical that they do, because they're missing a key element, and a team that has been bad for so long, if they have a chance to really turn games on their head because they have a key special teamer like that, you got to take advantage of that. You got to try and win one of the 3 sides of the ball
right,
on a consistent basis, and I think he gives you the opportunity to do that in the return game.
Oh, and he goes back to when Patrick Peterson was a rookie, right?
No question.
Returning all those punts for touchdowns.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you and I talked about that yesterday, didn't you? How, talking to some people in that building, would they go like 7-9 his rookie season?
I forget where their record was, but yeah, it was like a lot of it based upon those big returns.
Yeah, and the personnel guys said, we were a couple of Pat Peterson returns away from being 3-13, and 3-13 means you lose your jobs. So that's the kind of impact Jabril Peppers is capable of bringing on special teams and to the team as a whole.
Yeah, and again, like you had mentioned too, they're really excited about pairing a safety like this with Greg Williams. Yeah. So it should be exciting to watch Peppers.
And I think that they're a team, and certainly Greg Williams too, but just in general as a team philosophy, they're not going to say, okay, Peppers, you're a safety, you had to play this well-defined role. I think they're going to be willing to kind of experiment with him and figure out what he does best on an NFL field and put him in those positions to succeed.
And then they had three. That still blows my mind. They had 3 first-round draft picks and used them. So their third first-round draft pick was David Njoku, the tight end. They're so excited about his youth in particular because he's only like 20 years old. Yeah. And just like his versatility, because, he is a big kid, and a lot of these times with these tight ends, you're getting like one or the other, someone who could block or someone who could be used in the pass game. And he's one of those guys that can do both. They think that he can play in line, but they really like all the things that he can do in the pass game as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that versatility is key. We talked about that a little bit with Shaheen for Chicago, but I think it's more so with Njoku. I mean, he's just a different level athlete. I don't know what you do in terms of matching him up in coverage. I mean, it takes a really specific rare cat to kind of match up against him. Really, you're talking about needing a Cam Chancellor kind of guy to match up with him physically and athletically. I mean, he's just such a rare bird there. And then the fact that you can put him in line and have him do some blocking there, and he certainly has experience in that in Miami's pro set. There's a lot to like about Njoku, and obviously you talked about the youth. I think that's important for a young team as well. That's developing, and that's not necessarily expecting to have ticker tape parades this year. That when those guys are ready, you still have some youth and you still get some mileage out of them 4 or 5 years down the line when they are starting to compete for it all.
Yeah, and they mentioned, as you said, that he can play in line and that he can play like the U on the wing, and so he can move around. And they liked him. They contested catches, and also that he can separate. So that's always a nice thing if you have a receiving tight end who can separate and win at the catch point. It's going to be fun to watch him, like you said, Josh. He's going to be such a difficult guy to match up with. Their next pick they took was Deshawn Kaiser. They finally took a quarterback. The Cleveland media kept asking them about taking quarterbacks. The world famous vaunted Cleveland media. So they finally took one in the second round there with Kaiser. They did do a private workout with him, but they did do workouts with most of the top guys. He was just like, there's a lot to like about him, from a physical blueprint standpoint. You know what I mean? He's a big kid, physical, smart. They think that he works really hard on improving, and that's key, Josh, because that's bitten me in the butt more than once as an evaluator when I'm being too cynical about some of these quarterbacks, and can they work to improve on things? And they're saying that he's worked hard to improve, and so that to me sounds like he's on the right path.
Yeah, that was an interesting statement by Sashi Brown kind of talking about that. And I think that's extremely important. I mean, certainly last year, no one thought Dak Prescott was ever anywhere close to being able to be a competent player on the football field. And I think a lot of what he accomplished was because of his work ethic and his willingness to kind of evaluate where his skill set was and the direction he had to go with his game. So certainly at least saying the right things in that regard with Deshawn Kaiser. Also, I think, and when you take a defensive player first overall and not a quarterback, obviously Chicago felt a little bit different because they were willing to trade up to number 2 to take the quarterback. But still, Cleveland had to feel in some respects that the top 4 quarterbacks were fairly close in nature. So from an analytics perspective, it makes sense if you don't have the one clear standout guy that you absolutely have taken the top of the draft, and you have several guys lumped in. You can wait and take that guy a little bit later, and I think he affords them some flexibility because of that. I think there's less pressure on Kaiser being a second-round pick, which is good for him, obviously. But also, we talked about all those future picks, too. I don't think they're beholden to Kaiser either. So, I mean, it might take 2-3 years, and Kaiser is the guy. Maybe he is the one, but they can still take another guy next year and feel comfortable with that as well, that they didn't waste a pick this year or take a guy too high that they have to be committed to in the short term, just hoping he pans out. I don't think that's the case with Kaiser, so I think that's smart in that aspect as well.
Yeah, and they had mentioned, too, that he has the size to play quarterback in the AFC North. And that's one of the things that you and I talk about a lot, too, is needing to have the requisite arm strength. So,
right.
PFF liked Cody Kessler when he was coming out, but Cody was never really viewed as a big, strong-armed quarterback. So, I mean, Kessler still has, the ability to, possibly win the starting spot there, but Kaiser sort of represents a different, body type, and a different sort of playing style, than does a Kessler. And then, like you said, Josh, I honestly think they're in great position to take a quarterback next year, and let's face it, there's a bunch of good ones to take.
Yeah. And if they have to get to number 1, let's say they win some games because Jabril Peppers is winning them games on special teams. Let's say they win 5-6 games this year, and that puts them at pick number 6, 7, 8. They have plenty of currency. I mean, they have 5 picks the first 2 days, 2 first-rounders. They're going to have the ability to go up and get their guy in the first round without mortgaging future drafts as well. So they're in a great position going forward in terms of draft strategy.
They really are. That's why they're like I said, they're just operating at a different level than other people right now, and it's fun to watch. Like you said, the players eventually have to hit, but it is fun.
Yeah, and I think it's important that I like the title that they give to DePodesta, Chief Strategy Officer, because ultimately this isn't just about how you evaluate football players and how they perform on the field and all that. You have to have a strategy and a plan in place to accumulate these guys, because it's not like you can just say, oh, I like Myles Garrett, I'm just going to take him. Well, there's only one team picking first overall every year, so you have to have a plan in place to be able to go get the guys that you like, and certainly going the way they've done in terms of accumulating a surplus of picks and being able to have the maneuverability they do. Again, 9 trades in two drafts, and certainly they'll have more next year. I have no doubt in my mind they will, whether they're going up or back. But they've just set themselves up in that position because they're willing to look at the strategy aspect of it as well, to be able to accomplish what they need to in a variety of ways.
Yeah, and look at that strategic move of the Brock Osweiler roster salary cap dump that they did with the Texans.
How creative was that?
That was so creative. What a huge strategic move. Not only did you get a quarterback who could possibly play games for you, but they had to spend that money anyways, because you have to reach a certain amount of spending anyways, and so that it helped them facilitate that as far as the Browns did anyways. And then they got a second-round pick a player. How do you make the trade? And the trade is you get a second-round pick and a player. You know what I mean? That's just what a weird trade.
Yeah, honestly, it's one of those things too where you look at other teams like Jacksonville. They always have a ton of cap space, even though they've been able to spend some money recently. You look at them and their quarterback situation, and they got to be saying, well, shoot, I wish we thought of that. We could have pulled that off. Even New England had money this year, right?
Yeah, I think so.
They probably could have paired that. It's certainly a New England kind of thing to do. So very creative working of the system there, and targeting and taking advantage of when one of their opponents was very, very vulnerable. Jordan, I think it's time to move on to our next guy. And this was a guy we talked about small school guys with the Bears. This was the one for the Browns, and a guy that really graded extremely well PFF-wise, and that's Larry Ogunjobi from Charlotte, defensive tackle. I think he's got some versatility in terms of he's got the quickness to play 3-tech. If you play 34, he can play some 5 as well. You can do a lot of things with him along that line. He really dominated his level of competition in Conference USA. But they also got a chance to take a look at him in the Senior Bowl, and I think it just kind of, with some of the quotes they had, that was really a tipping point for them. Because it was his ability to play up to that level of competition that convinced them that, okay, he can handle the step up to the NFL as well, and that's why he's worth a high pick for us.
Right. I mean, you had mentioned they said that he dominated Conference USA and improved every year, but, Conference USA isn't the same thing as the collection of people in Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl. So,
right.
For him to go out there, and he did perform pretty well from what I can recall during the practices.
Yeah. Again, that's just such a great opportunity for
it is.
For small school kids, and I'm not saying that like as I'm trying to pitch for small school kids, because every single one of them gets the opportunity because they know this is their opportunity to show, hey, I can step up and play with the big boys, because ultimately that's the first thing that every single team is going to say to them and say, hey, why'd you end up at this small school? You did it against this level. That's fine. What's going to convince me that you can step up and play against the elite of the elites? And Senior Bowl is that first opportunity for these guys, and I just love seeing guys like Ogunjobi get that opportunity and excel every year.
Yeah, it was great to see. And he, like I said, he did perform really well there. And like you mentioned, it is a great venue for those guys who don't necessarily get to play at the Power 5 programs to really show what they can do. So yeah, all those smaller school guys out there, if you get that invite from Uncle Phil Savage and Uncle Patrick Wu, make sure you respond. Get down to Mobile. All right, Josh.
Respond soon, very possible.
They took Howard Wilson, a corner. They liked his length and his ability to take the ball away. Later on, they took Roderick Johnson, a tackle. They said they're going to start him off at left tackle. It's not like he's going to actually be starting, but I think that's where they're going to use him position-wise. But I imagine they're probably sort of work him out as a swing tackle, because no one's taking those starting left tackle snaps anytime soon. Next, they took Kayla Brantley, who they didn't really mention too much in the pressers, but I
think they wanted to avoid him at that point as much as possible.
Quite possibly.
But to their credit, I mean, he ended up being cleared of the charges that were against him. Am I correct in that?
I don't recall. I think so.
I do believe he was cleared with that. So it sounds like the background work they did on Brantley paid off, because there were points during his college career where you thought, yeah, this guy is definitely a top 50 pick. So
yeah, on the field, he's not worthy where they took him. He was a lot better player than that.
Yes. Yeah, there's no question about that.
Yeah, for sure. So, but yeah, I think you're right, Josh. I mean, if things cleared out and they did their due diligence and that all paid out, bravo for them, because, again, that's a player that got good value there late in the draft. The next player they took was a PFF favorite, and that was kicker Zane Gonzalez.
I think you mean a Jordan Plocker and Gordon McGinnis favorite.
It's a Gordon McGinnis thing. But yeah, I was at Zane's pro day. But yeah, so he's again, big leg, should do well there in Cleveland. You just never know what the kicking competition is going to work out.
Yeah, that's the point to be made too, in terms of, I mean, you generally think all your kickers that you draft are going to be big legs, but some of them are maybe more on the accuracy end of it. That's where they excel, like a Dan Bailey out of Dallas. I mean, he didn't really develop his leg until later, but he was so consistent, and that's what made him so strong in Dallas area in his career. Zane brings both of them. And again, when you have those bad weather games in Cleveland versus the weather and obviously the dome situation in Dallas, which is a little bit different, you need guys that can kick it through that wind and be able to handle those gusts, and Gonzalez is capable of doing that.
Yeah, and then they finished up with running back Matt Days from North Carolina State, 3-year starter, productive, and they thought he was really good at pass pro. So, when you're drafting that late, you kind of want to find something that really stands out, and that really stood out for them. So they took him there. Forecasting them forward, gosh, again, I became a huge Sashi Brown fan, just sort of seeing all these things that they've been doing. But Josh, like I said, they have the Texans' first-round pick next year for the Deshaun Watson trade. They have the Texans' second-round pick next year for the Brock Osweiler trade. They have the Eagles' second-round pick for the Carson Wentz trade. So, I mean, they own the draft next year, right? I mean, it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's, I mean, obviously anyone who's been listening to our podcast knows that it's going to be an absolutely loaded draft in terms of the quarterback position. And certainly regardless of what happens with Cleveland, again, they're in the pole position to be able to control that draft from wherever they're picking. And regardless of quarterback play of their three guys this year, they're going to be the team to watch. And it's going to be really intriguing to see what they do come next April.
Yeah, and I mean, I would not be shocked at all if they come out of it with not only a high pick quarterback, but also some extra picks too. I mean, it's been ridiculous the way that they've been maneuvering things and working things the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. All right, Josh, this front office that's in Cleveland now that I'm suddenly a huge fan of. Now I'm a huge Sashi Brown fan, but Sashi wouldn't be there, if some things had gone differently in the draft. Some previous drafts for the Browns, Josh. So just so we could mess with some things, what do you think we jump in the time machine? It's still functioning. Should we jump in the time machine and alter the Browns' history?
Oh, so I didn't break it last week?
No, it's still working.
Yes, let's do it.
All right, it's time for the draft time machine, Josh.
Yeah.
What dial? What year, Josh? What year? What am I setting this dial?
Oh, we are not setting it back too far. We are going to the year 2014.
2014. All right. And what are we going to do today, Josh?
Well, I want to start by saying in general, I think part of the massive intrigue that the draft brings is that everyone is kind of on an even playing field in the draft, and any one draft can change the course of an entire franchise. And quite frankly, I think we saw that in 2014 with the Raiders. Obviously, the Raiders had really fallen on hard times the whole prior decade. And they turned it around with two massive picks in 2014, taking Khalil Mack 5th overall, and then in the second round, taking their quarterback Derek Carr 36th overall. Another team that has been on hard times, we just talked about Cleveland. Certainly, they're in that same boat. They went the complete opposite that draft, Jordan. They could not have had a worse day one in terms of the production they got out of 2 first-round picks. 8th overall, big-time players on the board. If they wanted to go tight end, they had Eric Ebron on the board, wide receiver Odell Beckham, Aaron Donald. He was on the board at that point. Obviously, hindsight's 20/20, but those are all really highly regarded players.
Oh yeah,
at that point in time. No, they didn't do any of that. They took Oklahoma State cornerback Justin Gilbert. And what's Justin Gilbert doing now? He's not playing football.
Yeah, what was the deal with him? I mean, he was super athletic. Did he just not have the drive for the game?
Well, I think there was some of that. There was certainly some off-field issues with him, but quite frankly, I never liked him on film. He was certainly a combine speed guy. I want to say he was under 4.4. He was in the 4.36 range. But I always thought he was a straight-line guy. He showed some hip stiffness, and in man coverage, I thought he consistently got beat a step or two when trying to transition because of his upright playing style. And he just wasn't a guy that could ever figure it out or ever adjust once he was, or and recover once he was beaten. That's something you and I talked about quite a bit leading up to this past draft class, is the ability to recover when beaten. And I never saw that with Gilbert, and he just never panned out for them.
So if I cross out Gilbert's name and we remove his subpar cornerback production from the Browns, who do you want me to write in there, Josh?
Yeah, obviously I went over some names that all three of them were good, but certainly I wouldn't put Ebron at the caliber of Beckham or Donald. Looking at that roster in Cleveland and really just lack of a true number one playmaker, I'm going to say let's go with Odell Beckham Jr. At wide receiver.
All right, so Justin Gilbert no more, writing in Odell Beckham Jr. for the Browns. They can finally score some touchdowns, Josh.
Touchdowns are important. You should be trying to score them, yes.
Yeah, but their offense struggled for so long to even score. So, I mean, that would just be a huge boon to that offense as far as, again, a playmaker of that caliber who could just change games in a moment's notice. That is a huge get for the Browns. Unfortunately, the Giants will lose out. But we've just given the Browns, Josh, a tremendous playmaker.
Mm-hmm. The problem is they need someone to throw it to them. And while they took a quarterback with their next pick, that's clearly not the guy long-term that should be throwing the ball to Odell Beckham Jr. They traded back up to pick number 22 of the first round, and they took the highly visible, highly controversial Johnny Manziel from Texas A&M.
Johnny Football.
And I don't think I need to go into the reasons why that has not worked out. Part of the problem is none of that really should have been a surprise. Unfortunately, the off-field stuff, the problems he's had, that was all very well documented beforehand. That was no big secret in the league, and they jumped up and took a huge gamble and lost. But I already mentioned guy that ended up at the Raiders that would end up, like I said, probably completely changing that franchise. What if they had just taken Derek Carr?
Ooh. All right, so I can cross out Johnny Manziel, who's out of the league, and write in Derek Carr, who has the arm strength to drive the ball through that Cleveland wind.
Oh, he does.
And now you have a Derek Carr throwing to Odell Beckham in Cleveland?
Oh, that's exciting, isn't it?
Woo!
Yeah, I think that completely changes the picture for the Browns and sets them up, obviously, very, very well going forward. With apologies to Raiders fans, because they're going to have to look elsewhere at quarterback, something that's a position that obviously really befuddled them since Rich Gannon moved on and in their Super Bowl era in the early 2000s. Boy, you love the concept of putting that elite quarterback with that elite receiving talent, and I could not think of a better, more exciting young duo than Odell Beckham Jr. and Derek Carr. That would be awesome to watch.
That would be an awesome duo, and they're so young too. You've given the Browns, this awesome duo for years in the future too.
Yep.
So it's amazing how, again, our hindsight's 2020, draft time machine hindsight's probably 2010. Again, amazing what you can do for a franchise just by making slight changes to some of these picks.
No question.
Love the time machine. All right, Josh, that is it, buddy. We are out of here. So, again, please go to profootballfocus.com and subscribe to either PFF Edge or PFF Elite. Make sure you get your draft guide so you can follow along with Josh and I every week. And we're actually going to be bumping up to 2 shows a week once we get into the season. So you're going to want to stay up to date and stay with us. Make sure you leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, and we'll see you guys later. Josh, anything on the way out?
See you next week. Enjoy the preseason this week, guys.
Woohoo!